All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. 365, we making a plays. You talking the game, get you to the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. In the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, like working your faces. Grace up the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays. Network. All sports, all plays. Network. We on top of our game. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays.
Welcome in to another episode of Blown Coverage. I'm Porter Hayes alongside my co-host Chris Osborne. And man, we didn't record last week, and it seems like every time we don't record 1 week, a bunch of stuff happens. We've got a lot to cover. You got your Final Four set. You got all your bowl games set, National Signing Day. Everything's going on. So, Chris, I mean, what happened in the SEC championship game, and how do you think everything played out with the selection of the top four teams?
Well, I think Georgia went into the game, I won't say undetermined, but I think they knew win or lose they were in. Bama went in knowing if we lose, we are out. So I think one team wanted it more, and I don't want to use that as an excuse because we didn't play well. We didn't game plan well on offense. We stuck to a game plan that worked sporadically but didn't produce in the second half at all. And I kind of fault Kirby for that. I expected, JT Daniels to at least get a series, and he never did.
Yeah, and it was like a tale of two teams. You've seen how Alabama struggled against Auburn. You were thinking, struggling against a 6-6. Of course, we know the rivalry, but Alabama takes that seriously. So to see them struggle the way they did against Auburn, and to have to come back and drive down the field, and then to force overtime against a depleted Auburn team who didn't have their quarterback. The quarterback that they had out there was on a bum leg. So you're thinking coming into the SEC championship game, just how dominant Georgia looked, that this was going to be a cakewalk. And I think there was a lot of people that were surprised. But then you got the other side of it, those that thought, all right, was this game kind of rigged to make sure that two teams got into the SEC, got in, because that's where all the money's at. That's where everything seems to be going. And it just looked, and I wasn't thinking that, but I kind of want to point out the way that Davis was playing, and it looked like the lack of interest was there. It's like he would play one or two plays, and then he would just give up a whole series, and he wouldn't come out there. So I can see where some of them are coming from, because if Georgia beats Alabama, they're out of the playoff. And people didn't want Cincinnati in to begin with, but they deserved it. You can't sit there and say that an undefeated team, the way they played, they beat Notre Dame, and then how everything else fell, the pieces fell, they definitely deserved. But when you look at the rankings, you're not going to give Michigan the number one spot, because then that would force 2 and 3, Alabama and Auburn, or Alabama and Georgia to play first round. They're not going to have a first round rematch. That's just how everything plays out. So Alabama gets the one playing Cincinnati. And I'll tell you what, that Michigan-Georgia game, it's going to be a dandy.
I mean, you're taking two strengths and you're going strength on strength all game. Freddie, how you doing, man? Thanks for stopping by. Henderson, he the CEO, he the boss man.
Yes. What's up, boss?
So, you're putting strength on strength, but I think it's a lot more than their offensive line versus Georgia's defensive line. I think you're going to be looking at, if you're Michigan, your game plan isn't we're going to come in and run the ball. I mean, that's not where you want to go. You're going to come into this game looking at how play action early is going to take advantage of the system. And for Georgia, I mean, you plan your defense to play the way they have, with the exception of the Alabama game. I would like to point out, though, if you go back and look at games, this defense is a little different without Adam Anderson. I mean, when he was coming off the edge, we didn't see a ton of Nakobe Dean or Quay Walker up the middle. You've seen a lot more of that since Adam Anderson has been suspended. I don't know if that changed our entire defense, but going into this Michigan game, Adam Anderson would be a commodity. He's a guy that sets the edge very well and can really, pin his ears back on third down. Without him, I mean, the defense just looks a lot different.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that you got to realize going into these games, these coaches, these teams, they have a month to prepare for each other. And that is the biggest detriment to me when it comes to when you're looking at the four teams. That's where Cincinnati, I think, you cannot ever bet against Saban. And now you're giving him a month to prepare for your team. There's already a chip on your shoulder because, yeah, they didn't belong or they got lucky or fluke and they beat Georgia. They played the game of their lives. So, and they're not going to let Cincinnati come in there being a Power 5 school. Right. And beat them. It's just not going to happen. I really applaud the committee for putting them in and letting it happen. I really feel bad that Cincinnati has to play either Alabama or Georgia, whoever it was, or even Michigan. But when it's come down to it, and you've got a month to prepare, it's going to be hard to beat a Nick Saban coach team. And it would be nice to keep it competitive, but I don't see it even being a game. Alabama's just got too much talent to really in depth. I mean, to see that Cincinnati, I think Cincinnati might come out and surprise, but Alabama's played on their heels before. You've got to play this team a full 4 quarters. We've seen against Auburn. We thought Alabama was dead in the water, and then they come back and score. And that guy, it's funny. They said I think it was Bigsby, if he does not go out of bounds and he falls down, Auburn wins the game.
Yep.
So, I mean, and then you give them that much time to come back. They're coming in. Bryce Young got his Heisman Trophy, and I mean, Jameson Williams. I mean, that team is just, again, they're peaking at the right time, just kind of like what they did last year with Devontae Smith and how they just peaked in Mac Jones. And so the Michigan-Georgia game is going to be the game that's going to be a toss-up to me. But you got a team like Michigan. They feel like they've got something to prove too because, I mean, yeah, they took that Ohio State game and everybody could have thought, well, that's their Super Bowl. Then they just dominated Iowa. So that's going to be a very intriguing game. But I don't see Cincinnati hanging with Alabama. So it's going to be Alabama. And man, if I was to have to pick, I would give an edge to Georgia right now because I just don't think that Michigan has played a team as physical as Georgia. I mean, the Ohio State, they're okay, but they're young. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
I would give the advantage to Georgia just because, and the key is actually going to be Michigan's quarterback, McNamara. I don't know how to say it, but if he can connect on the second and long, third and short plays and keep the chains moving, I mean, they have a chance. I would assume, coming into the game, just relying on a running game is not going to work. They're going to try things that they probably haven't done all year. There's 2 or 3 plays in the back of the book that Jim Harbaugh doesn't pay attention to. But when it comes down to playing a team like Georgia, I mean, Bama put up big points, and Saban says this almost every year. You don't know what team you have until week 7 or week 8. You can have the best game in week 1 and your worst game in week 15. So I think they are peaking at the right time. I'm interested to see, without Mechie, without some key secondary guys, are they going to be able to play a full 4 quarters against Cincinnati? Because I do think one thing Cincy's going to do, Luke Fickell is going to go Geronimo every chance he gets. They're going
house money.
Force Alabama to play quick. And that has a tendency to beat SEC power defenses. So that's the angle they can take. And then for Michigan, if they get in the 30s, I think they easily beat Georgia. I think the goal is less than 20. I think we can put up 24. I don't think we can put up. We're not going to win an offensive shootout with Stetson Bennett, of course. So I still pick Georgia. I still pick Bama, but it's not going to be what people expect.
It's going to be very interesting to see how Georgia responds if Michigan just comes out and hits them right in the mouth. I mean, that just seemed like that's what Bama did to them, and of course, it seems like Saban has Kirby's number. You got those games, and that was what was very surprising to me. Of all the teams that Harbaugh did beat, he beat Ohio State and beat them as bad as he did because that was a team that had his number. So, I mean, everybody seemed to have his number when it comes to those big games. And for him to duplicate that and really dominate Iowa the way he did, that's what really intrigued me to say that they have a chance against Georgia. If they would have struggled against Iowa, it would have been like, okay, they laid it all out for the Ohio State game, struggled against a decent Iowa team, but the way they just manhandled that game, it gives them a shot. Because I'll tell you what, if the defense comes out and plays flat like they did against Alabama, I mean, they'll get beat just as bad as Michigan beat Ohio State. I mean, you can't come into this game and think, well, this is a Big Ten team. They're not going to come in. I mean, Big Ten's not, other than, Ohio State's dominating performance against Clemson last year. Big Ten schools really not had that much fare since Ohio State won it. You look at Michigan State when they got blanked, and then Ohio State when they got beat by Clemson the last time. So I think the Big Ten's got something to prove here, that they belong in that final and to hang. But then if they move on, because here's the deal. You got to look at Alabama's situation. They got a month to prepare for Cincinnati. And if they really think, you look at what Clemson did when they had to play Notre Dame and then Alabama, they kind of just skipped over Notre Dame because they knew that they were the dominant team. I think Alabama is in the same situation. Not saying they're going to overlook Cincinnati. They're going to respect them. But now they already know how to game plan against Georgia. They're going to focus, just in case they have to play Michigan, they can focus all their time and energy on look at what Michigan does because they've played Georgia before. They know their tendencies, and then, of course, with Cincinnati. So that's another thing to look at to give the advantage. If you want me to call the national champion right now, I would say Alabama has the edge because of the game plan, and you got Georgia's number. You're going to have all this time to plan for Cincinnati and possibly plan for Michigan because Georgia's tendencies.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if I had to pick one too, I hate it because you see my team, but I'm sorry, but until Stetson Bennett changes something in my mind, or we see JT Daniels, and I said this 7 weeks ago, when Stetson Bennett was named, the full-time starter or whatever, JT actually gives them a better chance to run the ball. The deep ball always backs up safeties. That our running game has changed because Stetson Bennett can't get it consistently down the field that way. Those safeties have inched up every week. And, you go back and look at the Bama game. I don't recall one safety not being in the box on a 1st and 10 or 2nd and anything less than, 8. I mean, they were there all game. And it just forced us to change all of our normal 1st and 10 plays.
That just shows the game plan. I mean, that just shows how well Saban knows the team. But when you got 25 freaking assistants and those coaches that they let come in and that they have one sole job, they're like assistants or unpaid assistants or whatever they call them. That Saban recovery school or whatever. You got all these coaches that just go there to learn from him, and they have 2 coaches sit down and just game plan for that team. I mean, that's become another advantage when it comes to the coaches and just how much film they get to look at. But outside of the top 4, let's look at some other bowls. And you look at the Michigan State and Pittsburgh. You got Notre Dame, Notre Dame and Oklahoma State, Ohio State, Utah, and Ole Miss and Baylor. I think 2 of those 4 are going to be absolute shootouts. I'm looking forward to seeing that's Ole Miss and Baylor game, and I'm looking forward to that Notre Dame Oklahoma State game just for the defense that Oklahoma State plays, and against a team like Notre Dame that you always seem to count out. They're always there, but Now they have something to prove because, they didn't make the college football playoff, how they bounce back, and especially losing their coach. And that's another thing we're looking into these games like OU, all these coaches that have to leave, and we'll get into that in a bit when we talk about our signing day. But, this early signing period has really hurt some of these teams when it comes to these bowl games because coaches are kind of forced to be like, man, I need to get a head start on my new team. So if you're not making the college football playoffs, then it's like everybody's talking about these opt-outs and, well, you shouldn't do this. You should think about, my God, look at Lincoln Riley. Look at Coach Kelly. They left. Nobody's saying they gave up on their team or their school. I mean, I know OU threw a tantrum because they've never had to deal with a coaching search since 99 or whatever. This is the first time they're really having to deal with going out and looking at it. But I feel like with coaches leaving and having to get that jump start on their new team with the transfer portal, you're having to re-recruit your players on your team and the kids that are committed to that school, and then try to bring. I mean, it's crazy how much goes into coaching. You couldn't pay. I mean, like these coaches getting paid $9-10 million a year now. I mean, you look at all they have to do every single year because of just the simple fact of the transfer portal, keeping your kids, trying to find kids that want to leave another school to come to you, and then recruit the kids out of high school. It's chaos.
But, the transfer portal, when it became a thing, the biggest two people against it was Saban and actually Jerry Jones of Dallas Cowboys. They both said, you're basically giving, a free agency to a sport that has never seen anything like it. I mean, these coaches, ask them, they spend hundreds and hundreds of hours working on one kid because he's a plug and play, or he completes their system. And if he doesn't play right away, he's gone. And, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, you could still work them up. You could redshirt them. You can't redshirt a 5-star now. That's like grounds for transfer. That's almost instant. So,
but like I said, it goes both ways though, because never have we ever seen a coach leave OU for USC. Never have we seen a coach leave Notre Dame for LSU, and they're just leaving. They're not. And another thing is, say, look at Pete Carroll when all that stuff went down at USC. He got to leave, walk away, didn't have to do pay anything really, get in trouble for what happened at USC. The school and the recruits, they are the ones that hurt. He got to go coach the Seahawks like nothing even happened.
Yeah,
so
right.
it does go both ways when it comes to, you put all this time and effort in these kids and you want them to stay. But yet if a coach wants to go off to another school, or if the board of trustees or the chancellor, the athletic director don't feel that coach is living up to the expectations, he's gone. That kid committed to that coach. So why shouldn't they get a fair shake? Now, with this NIL money, the name, image, and likeness, now they're starting to get a little bit of money, and they should. When you're paying these coaches $7 to $10 million a year, and these kids aren't getting paid anything, now they're getting money and being able to offer likeness, because you can't tell me when you go into a store, your favorite player's number is sitting there without his name on it, but you know who that is. So it's good to see this NIL kids, and it's going for all sports. You're having seen it. Women's athletes are getting it. Basketball players, everybody's getting a piece of the pie. So yeah, I guess to make a long story short, I would have to agree. Like when it comes to the coaching stuff, yeah, they put a lot of time and money into it, but they get paid a lot of money to do what they do. So that's my argument on that.
And I can totally accept that. I can just see the frustration. I mean, you look at schools, it's rich getting richer, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Schools like, we'll just take Oklahoma right now. They were in that category. They lose their coach. They've lost how many recruits already? They're going to lose more players to the portal before this is all said and done. And it's not that I don't necessarily like the Brent Venables hire. I don't exactly like it.
I hate it. For personal, being a Clemson fan, no, I don't hate it. I mean, I hate to lose him, but I mean, that guy, he was there, and they kind of let him go. Now they want him back because it's almost like you you break up with your girlfriend, she finds a new boyfriend, and she's off at the prom with him, and they're about to get married, and all this success, and now you want them back. But no, nothing but love for Brent Venables, and I think he's going to do a good job, and this is why. He knows how to run an SEC style type of team. That team Clemson had, and that defense he built, he's carried, other than, Trevor Lawrence's freshman year where they had Justin Ross and ETN and, T. Higgins. That defense carried that team. Boulware and the defensive line this year, you look at this year with that team, the defense got them to the Cheez-It Bowl. That offense was atrocious. Yeah. When you're a Clemson team and they're praising you for being in week 6, 7, and you score over 20 points for the first time. So I think it was an excellent hire because he's a good guy. I think he's going to do things the right way. But the only thing I had concern with is, like, you see how high strung he is on the defense side. Can you imagine him having to have 2 get back coaches, one for the offense and one when they're on the defense side? He's not going to have no time to chill out,
Yeah.
But OU situation, I mean, how to bounce back, Clemson lost all their coordinators, their OC, their DC. Elliott went to Virginia, and then Venables, of course, went to OU, and they're hiring within. So I'm kind of really intrigued to see how that all works out. I was kind of really hoping for a long shot at Brady. Somebody could come in and really develop DJ and this new kid. They got the number 1 quarterback in the nation. I can't even remember his name off the hand right now, but yeah, now out of Texas. So, I mean, but you just see everything. But I'm looking at teams like who I cover, the Arkansas Razorbacks. And you look at these teams that, if it wasn't for this transfer portal and you're able to go get guys, you're going to have more parity than ever. And it still kind of is, but it still gives teams a fighting chance to be competitive. It causes for a quicker bounce back, and Arkansas goes 8-4, and was a touchdown from beating Bama. They played Bama tough down to the wire. So it's been good because, the kid makes a choice. And if you go into a job and that job don't work out, you can go find another job. You can go find somewhere to use your skills and become a better employee and a better person. I think that's part. I mean, has this been taken advantage of? Yes. But everything in college sports and athletics has been taken advantage of.
Right.
But you got a kid that goes to a school and it doesn't work out and he doesn't get to play. He has a chance to go. Look, I mean, goodness gracious, Baker Mayfield. I mean, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, all these kids that got to go transfer and become these stars and make millions of dollars in the NFL. Yes, it's a 1%, but at least those 1% are getting a second chance and change their lives like nobody else would.
Well, Jalen Hurts.
Yep.
I mean, he's still there. He's still kicking it in Philly. So,
yep.
And that's just a product of Lincoln Riley's system too. I mean, he's good at developing quarterbacks.
I'm interested in seeing how he is now because he was given the talent, and let's see how he can build his own team. I'm not saying he didn't do anything for those quarterbacks, but, I'm talking about when it comes to building a team and you're underneath the pressure of out in California of, all right, we're paying you all this money. We bought you a house. We paid off your other houses. We gave you everything in the world other than renamed your dogs. I mean, let's see how you can do. But, man, you look at this game between Ole Miss and Baylor, and you see what Baylor did to Oklahoma State. I mean, you want to talk about the Big 12 and defensive stand I thought I would never say in my life. Mm-hmm. But yeah. that 4th and goal and how they were able to keep Oklahoma State out of the end zone for 7 tries on the 1-yard line, that was amazing. And how when the kid kicked it out and was running toward that pylon, I was like, Oklahoma State's going to win. And then he come up short, and it was crazy. So I'm really looking forward to how they are matching up against that high-powered offense with Lane Kiffin and Matt Corral at Ole Miss. And another thing is, too, we talk about these opt-outs. So you're always waiting to see these opt-outs.
To help you out for the holidays.
So I think
I'm looking at one of the games I'm really looking forward to is North Carolina, South Carolina. I've been calling it the battle for Charlotte, winner takes all style. But, those are 2 programs that went in different directions. I mean, North Carolina was preseason top 5, and they just had an awful year. Just about everyone in the ACC could beat them. And South Carolina, new coach Shane Beamer, I'm impressed with what he's done with what he has. He's got some pieces coming in next year that should boost their depth and give them some star power. I'm not sold on Spencer Rattler being the guy next year, but for this game, this bowl game, a win here against North Carolina may seem minute, but in that battleground area, we have another signing day coming up. It might be just what they need. If there's a guy sitting on the fence between North Carolina, South Carolina, Wake Forest, somewhere in there, this is that game that gives them that push. So I think that's one of those games that, even if it's not a good game on the field, this is an important game for both of those teams.
Yeah, especially with South Carolina, because they're playing North Carolina, but they smell blood in the water. They see their in-state rivals struggling. They see them leaving, and that goes into recruiting. Of course, Carolina wants to beat Clemson every year, just as Clemson wants to beat. But now it's gotten to the point to where that's how Clemson caught up. They started out recruiting and taking kids out of South Carolina, and now the tables could turn. You bring in Spencer Rattler and his guys, Stogner, and another tight end from another receiver from Oklahoma. I'm kind of with you on that. Is if you can't do that with the talent you had at OU and the surroundings and that team, it's going to be hard to. And I guess that's the thing is you look at these hype that goes with the quarterback. Again, Clemson with DJ and the hype, Mr. Dr. Pepper, and then he just falls flat and doesn't really become what we thought he did. Look at Ohio State. The kid skipped his senior year of high school to go to Ohio State. Now he's transferring back to Texas. So sometimes there's so much hype. And I think sometimes these kids get all this fame and this money and they're trying to process it. And I think a previous episode I was talking about they're losing focus on the game and they're worried about getting their money in these deals. I think you've got to be able to set aside when, yes, go get your money, go get your, your endorsements and your commercials and stuff. But you got to remember what pays the bills, and that's the football. You got to be a player first. And I think some of these kids can't handle it. I mean, you're handing it to 17 and 18-year-old kids and thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. We don't know exactly what these big time deals are, but it's funny, like the Ears kid out of Ohio State, and Spencer Rattler, if things aren't going his way and you get benched, and we call it kind of a diva dash, let's just go somewhere else and try to make something of ourselves, and let's see how his head, maybe sometimes it grows up because, when Felipe Franks was at Florida, they had the same kind of thoughts about him and he transferred to Arkansas and man, he grew up. And I think sometimes you need that kick in the butt and to really help you grow up and become a better person. So, I mean, and I know it's a school that they're going to, but I mean, I wish them the best. I don't wish any ill will on any kid that transfers or goes. I don't care what school they're coming from or going to, And plus, I want to see the rivalry. I mean, we beat them 7 years in a row, and there's been a few years it's been close, but I mean, like this year, Clemson had its worst team in 11 years and beat them 30-0. So, I mean, I want to see that rivalry. And with this North Carolina, South Carolina game, yeah, that's a lost because everybody focuses on the Clemson, South Carolina game. But, yeah, there's not any blood loss against those two schools either.
Right. And I'll just hit on Quinn Ewers, Ohio State kid, real quick. I can understand his transfer completely. And some people may not realize this, but he reclassified from 2022 to 21 because, one, someone on that staff told him we're having a lot of uncertainty at quarterback next year. I mean, at the time, and you look at CJ Stroud's first few games, he did not look like the guy. I'm not sold that he is. He's a much better quarterback today than he was game 1 or 2 or 3. But for Ewers to be sitting in high school, someone had to call him and say, look, would you like to reclassify? We have a golden opportunity. You might be able to walk in the door tomorrow and be our starting quarterback game 1. And for him to see nothing, no playing time, meaningful anything, I can understand the transfer. He kind of feels like
kind of. I think here's the deal. You've got to look at the reason why he did declassify in the first place. Not saying he didn't have somebody in his ear saying, but okay, let's look at recruits. They're going to promise you everything in the world to come get you to come to their school.
Mm-hmm.
but he declassified because they wouldn't allow him to make money being a high school football player in Texas.
Right.
So he declassified and joined. So right there, I mean, I don't know the kid. I'm not trying to trash the kid. I'm just saying when it comes to when I'm reading the tea leaves and when you decide for your purpose, I'm going to go ahead and enroll early at Ohio State because he had this big deal. And then he decided to enroll and because they wouldn't let you make any money at the high school level for Texas. So that, I mean, I can kind of see it, but I never got the impression that he was going to get to play. And I know there was a lot of other people that knew when he was going into Ohio State, he wasn't going to play much this year. So if he got the wrong impression or somebody was in his ear and he's seen that, of course, Stroud, I don't know, is he a senior this year or is he coming back?
I think he's got one more year.
Okay. So, I mean, he might have seen that as, all right, I thought that I could compete against this guy, seeing how good he played. He's coming back. I know that I'm probably going to play next year. So therefore he transferred. I don't doubt that. I don't fault the kid for transferring. I don't fault any kid for transferring. You go do what's best for you. And right. I think him going to Texas and he's going to a guy in Sark that can he's produced some good quarterbacks too. We forget, he was a very good OC at Alabama. So, that's interesting to see. But, I think this bowl season's going to be good. But I'm at the point where I think that for the good of the game, I think I don't fault people for opting out, but I think if you expand the college football playoffs or make something to where there's more teams involved, you're going to see less of it because it seems like now if you're not in the college football playoffs, the bowls don't really mean as much as they used to. And I think that now that the kids are starting to get a little bit more money, they're getting this NIL money and they expand the playoffs to get to where we're not having a 12-0 Cincinnati team even be in a discussion of why they don't belong in the playoffs because there's only 4 teams. I think that's another reason why I think they should expand it to 8. I think an 8-team playoff would be perfect because we're always talking about the 5 and 6, and there's not that big of a gap between the 5 and 8. But if you get expanded to 12, there's a huge gap in between 8 and 12. I mean, it just seems like that every year. So. But National Signing Day, I mean, Georgia racked up, SEC racked up once again. And I'll tell you a school that was really surprising to me, and that was Missouri. I mean, Missouri ended up being 9th overall and 4th in the SEC in recruiting. And, man, just the kind of year they had, it was kind of crazy that they still recruited that high today.
I'm going to go a little further and look at a team that – I'm going to go Florida and say big disappointment. I know they just got a new coach. I get it. But their class was really bad to begin with. And I thought Billy Napier might be able to, get somebody. They came up empty today.
Yeah. And it's hard when the coach comes from the school he come from and you got to prove yourself. I mean, it's going to be hard to really get these kids to flip. And that's what we're talking about this early signing day. You're trying to flip kids in 2 weeks. And if they're not happy in the position where they're at, or if they've already committed somewhere else, it's going to be hard to change their mind. I've talked to so many kids that, they were 50-50 and they built relationships with both coaching staffs, and one coach leaves. So therefore they know what they're getting out of this coach. And you said it, you don't want to go into a system and have to compete when you don't know what style they run, who's even going to be your coach. And then you're already set back a little bit if they don't run your style of offense or defense or whatever like that. But yeah, I mean, and then the whole Florida State deal and, the number 1 recruit would go to Jackson State. I mean,
that's crazy.
To me, it was awesome. It's awesome because I love to see people wanting to do that and what Deion, stuck it to his alma mater. I mean, he went and flipped the kid and, there's a lot of discussion about that, and what went into it. But, it was cool to see the kid, hey, look, I want to go to HBCU. I'm going to go play with Deion. And, we'll see what's going to happen with all that.
Yeah. I'm with you there. That was quite the surprise. I had no idea that Travis Hunter was even, talking to anyone else. He'd been on campus, I think they said 5 times since spring at Florida State. I mean, he was sold. He was, Tallahassee bound, and then this pulls up. So I was shocked on that. Texas A&M really surprised me today. They pulled in some guys that I didn't think. I didn't think they could hold on to Walter Nolan. I really thought he was going to have a double take when the defensive tackle that flipped from, I believe it's Oklahoma, Gabriel Brownlow. When he flipped, I kind of looked at that as this might be a Walter Nolan back off, because it's not that they're going to play the same position, but Nolan is trying to be that versatile. He can play 2 gap, 3 gap, whatever he wants. And Dindy is going to be almost straight up defensive tackle. He's not going to switch around. So I really thought that might be a back step for Nolan, but he signed, he stayed, and they picked up a 5-star receiver today too. So A&M jumped all the way to number 1. I'm happy that everybody's getting who they want. I will say that, I did say Florida got nothing. They did get Kamari Wilson, which shocked me. I mean, I pegged him for Georgia since spring, since he first said, I really like Athens. I'll be there this fall. That was a shocker to me to see him go anywhere else, especially to Florida, who is not our friend in this.
Yeah. So, and, Jimbo's always been able to recruit. I mean, he did it at Florida State, and it's just like he can recruit, and they're winning games, but it's just like, yeah, they beat Alabama this year, but it's like they just always have those hiccups. They always have those mind-scratching games, and look at the LSU game. You beat a team like Bama, and then you go up against, I guess it was the last, hoorah for Coach Ogeron, but and that's another school. Look at what's going on with that situation, and then you got Brian Kelly coming in from Notre Dame, and I think it was Scott Van Pelt or somebody was saying that it's crazy to believe that Notre Dame has now become a stepping stone job. Like, you're going to Notre Dame to go to LSU. I thought that was hilarious, but you never would have thought a prestigious school like Notre Dame. But you see, like I said, Lincoln Riley going to USC from OU, and going, Brian Kelly coming to LSU. So I'll tell you what, SEC is going to be stacked next year with coaches. And you get these guys you give it another 2 years, this SEC is going to be, especially with the introduction to, Brent Venables, and if Sark's still there, Texas and OU to the SEC. I'll tell you what, I'm interested in seeing what becomes of all that. When all these coaches get their feet wet and they get their systems in place, it's going to be one juggernaut of a conference.
Well, I mean, I was a little shocked to talk about SEC coaches last year. I know this is digging, but when South Carolina hired Shane Beamer, I was like, come on, man. You have Mike Bobo on staff. I really thought pulling Bobo in was like, okay, we know what's going to happen with Muschamp. Bobo's there when it happens. And that wasn't even ever a possible, I don't think. And that kind of scratched my head. So I will just say good job, South Carolina, getting who they think and looks like their guy. But you look at some of these other jobs that might come open. I think Ole Miss, I don't know that the carousel's over. I still think Lane Kiffin's got a shot to get an NFL job. He's that type of coach. He knows that much about his craft. So the Ole Miss job might be there. But you're going to see this revolving carousel, like with LSU. We knew Ed Orgeron was gone, but to get Brian Kelly says just how important being an SEC coach is in these coaches' minds. Lincoln Riley would have taken that job if it was available. I truly believe if LSU offered him the same money, I think he would have taken it just because it's SEC.
Yeah, and that's what we'll end on. We were talking about the money that is becoming involved. Now we're hitting $10-11 million a year is going to be the mark, because Coach Saban's going to get paid because it's in his contract that he has to be one of the highest paid coaches. So we'll see how that goes. But I mean, when Lincoln Riley gets 10, 11, Brian Kelly gets 10 or 11, look at Napier, what he get right off the bat. I mean, I think he's getting 7. So now you're setting the mark for first year, really Power 5, big boy contracts. You're getting $7 million. So now you trickle down to like at the school I cover, Arkansas. You've got a coach in Sam Pittman that was making $3.25 million.
Yeah.
Well, everybody else is getting money, so now he hired Jimmy Sexton as an agent. Now they put in an offer that was 7 years, $50 million. A lot of people, are up in arms about that, of course, because you're putting your highest mark out there. Just to throw the bait out there. Of course, it's going to come down. But I'll tell you this: a few years back, Arkansas was bound and ready to give Gus Malzahn a 7-year, $49 million deal. And if he wouldn't have beat Alabama that year, Gus Malzahn would have been the coach at Arkansas.
Yeah.
So it's crazy to think. But, I mean, that deal was, yay. I mean, they had plane trackers. They thought Lane Kiffin was coming. I mean, I'll tell you one thing when it comes to these coaching searches and stuff, man. These plane trackers, and they get crazy with that and looking at the planes and thinking this is coming in and Norman, who's flying in and out. But anyways, we'll wrap it up with that. Chris, man, and always, again, we're going to try to get it in next week, have another episode 2 weeks in a row. But want to really appreciate All Sports, All Plays for letting us do this. And, of course, we're presented by Sports and Culture, Sports Media. So thank you, Freddie. Thank you, Tyler, for letting us do this. And it's been a pleasure. And we'll talk to you next week.
Y'all have a good one.